episode 50 of the podcast. When you see a problem, start with these 3 steps. We're going to talk about step 1, what is the issue or complaint? Step 2, gathering clues, the who, what, where, when, and why. And step 3, making a plan. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Neumeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, certified behavior consultant for canines, certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is where grooming and training meet. When people ask me a question like, what do you do when a dog hates the dryer? That's the subject of the discussion. That's the complaint. I know that they're looking for an answer. They want to know what to try next. They need a plan. They might not know they need a plan, but they're thinking what to try next or what to try in general. What most people are not expecting is that I start with asking questions, and so many questions. I do this with owners, I do this with groomers, I do this with trainers. I just like a good mystery. So some of the questions are to observe the behavior. Now, when I'm talking to a dog owner and I was not there, or to another professional and I was not there, I start off by asking them to describe what happened. What they saw, what they heard, what they felt, etc. Those are our observations, and those are really important because we want to know what's going on without all of the labels of he was mad, he was scared, he was angry, he was defiant, he was dominant, he was bossy. We want to know when the dryer turned on, he wiggled backwards and then tried wiggling forward, that something very specific. So the more questions I ask, the more I can find out. And even with owners, you may be surprised at how much is noticed but taken for granted and not really processed, because there are so many details that I can coax out from someone's memory that they're not thinking those things are important. So I want you guys to start thinking about gathering clues. It's like a mystery. I love murder mysteries and cop shows and all of those kind of mysteries. In fact, sometimes my husband and I will pause something and discuss who we think did it before we move on to the rest of the episode. So I want you to think about asking these questions. Make it a fun process. Most of the people who contact me for asking questions, they're having a good time. We make sure that this is okay. And then what happened? An example would be when someone calls me and says their dog just goes nuts when he's on leash around other dogs. Okay, tell me what he does. Is he lunging forward? Is he pulling backwards? Is he barking? Is he growling? Is he snapping? Is he circling? Is his tail up? Is his tail down? Is it any dog? Does the other dog have to also be barking and lunging? Or is it a dog who's sitting and looking the other way? There are so many details. Details. The devil's in the details, right? So we want them to start noticing those details. And when you ask people questions, it starts to sink in. They have the answers, just that they didn't think that was important. They want him to stop doing. They want him to stop the thing. But without knowing why he's doing it, we run into some problems, right? So I want you to think about every good mystery needs some character development. So is the main character a bold guy or a nervous Nelly? Is the main character experienced or new at this? What's the motivation of this scene, right? Which sounds so cliche, but it's really fun, right? I want you to think who were the characters? Tell us more about them too. Who else was involved? What's going on? What is the whole scene? Where is this taking place? Because a dog that's not good for nails at the vet's office may be different at a grooming shop, may be different on a table or on the floor, may be different with an owner, may be different with the other owner, right? So to have more information gives us an idea of where our problem really lies. And I enjoy that process. It's the who, what, where, when, and why of any good story. And before we can move on to a plan, we need all of that information. Because without all of that information, we may use the wrong plan for this particular individual and situation. Making a plan is step 3. So the first step is just finding out what the issue or complaint was. That step 2 is gathering all of your clues. And then step 3 is making a plan. And I find that all too often we just jump to the plan, or we jump to the fix, or we jump to the let's try. But making the plan based on information, based on as much as we can get, means that perhaps the complaint of he hates the dryer, after asking all of our questions, turns out to be that he's a little bit wiggly when the dryer comes within an inch of his head. Maybe he's great for the rest of his body, right? That's much more specific. It leads us to a different set of training, right? Perhaps it's even more specific, and we found out that he recently had an ear infection and used to be good for drying his head. We can explore more training options when we know more about what happened and what the past is and what the history is. So when we're asking all of these questions and gathering clues, then we can make some accurate hopes and plans. Because plans are kind of hopes. If you're enjoying my podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. I want to give you some examples to really help drive this process home, okay? So step 1, what's the complaint, the issue, or the problem? Step 2, gather clues. Step 3, make a plan. So in this case, the complaint, I can't get my kid to do their homework. That's a complaint. We hear that. I know my parents used to say that a lot. So step 2 would be gather clues. So what kind of things would we ask a parent who's having trouble getting their kid to do their homework? All homework or some subjects? Is it math? Is it history? How old is your kid? What have you tried? Is this a new problem? Is this an old problem? Is it getting worse? Staying the same? Are they having difficulty with a subject? When should homework be getting done? Right? We start asking questions before we just jump to a conclusion. And then from there, we can make a plan, because the kid who's having trouble with only their math homework may require help in math. I mean, if they're having trouble with a writing assignment, but they fill out worksheets, they could need help with writing. So a plan for a kid who's not bringing their homework home needs an entirely different plan. Maybe they're not having a problem with any of that. They just aren't very organized. And I think when we look at examples, it makes us really think more about gathering the clues. Like, nothing is as cut and dry as, have you tried just saying no? Have you tried punishing him? Have you tried giving him cookies when he does his homework? Like, we really need more specific information to find out what is really happening. Here is another example, a little bit closer to home. The complaint. The owner brings this dog in matted every time. Now, as groomers, we know that happens a lot. Trainers, you might be exposed to that a bit. Like, why is this dog coming into my classes like a matted wreck, okay? But let's gather some clues. Does she say that she's brushing? Does this owner say that I do brush him, right? Does she own the correct brush and comb for that dog's coat type? Does she have any physical limitations that keep her from brushing? Severe arthritis? Is she in a wheelchair? What kind of things can you tell us about her? Have you given a brushing lesson? That's a good question. We're gathering information. Have you given options for trims that are easier to care for? Have you suggested more frequent grooming? Do they think that it's the child's dog and the child's chore to get brushing done? So those are all the kind of questions that I give based on past experience. And so sometimes we have to draw from our past experience to formulate our questions, but the more questions you ask and the more often you get used to doing this and searching for clues, the better you get at it. You start really getting a feel for what this dog might have in common with another dog in your past, or in this case, an owner with another owner from your past, right? So after asking all of our questions, we could make a plan. Perhaps that plan is to educate your customers about proper tools and brushing technique. If it's the owner that says they do brush, they're putting in time, and we can tell them, let me show you the tool and the technique that will work best for your dog's coat, because they probably got a pin brush or a bristle brush from some teenager in a pet store somewhere, or maybe Walmart, right? They don't understand the difference between the tools, so they thought they were brushing. But it could also be the owner that doesn't have any idea, and to teach them about skin health, that mats aren't just a few tangles that are looking shabby, that it actually affects the health of the dog's skin. But those are two very different plans. And you need to have the right plan for the right person, to solve the problem, to get to the point of that complaint. Because the owner that brings the dog in matted every time, we have a way to work on it. Okay? Another example, another one that's kind of closer to home. I tried to come up with examples that aren't necessarily dog examples, but things that will get us thinking. As an industry, get us kind of going, right, I think I understand where she's coming from. This one, the complaint. This brusher bather just doesn't get faces clean. Ah, it's a tough one, right? So gather clues. Does she think the faces look clean? Well, that's the first clue. That's the first question I would ask. Like, hey, do you think this face looks clean? Does she think that eye gunk will be trimmed out later? Which actually, I ran into this long, long, long ago when I was working with a brusher bather who was like, well, that gets trimmed out later. I'm like, I see. So some of these, like I said, are based on past experience, past things that I've seen. um, is this brusher bather worried about getting shampoo in the eyes? Okay. Is this brusher bather worried about being near dogs' faces? Was this brusher bather recently bitten while trying to get around a dog's face? Right? There are lots of questions that we would ask. So make a plan. Have you tried telling her a stern no or docking her pay? All right. And I'm goofing off because I think that so often we just jump to like solving the problem with make it stop, right? And that's what the purpose of this podcast is for, really, is to help people think in training mode and not necessarily make it stop mode. So if we were to make a plan for the brusher bather who doesn't get faces clean, we would gather up all of our clues and then figure out what this brusher bather needs to know. Okay? So after gathering your clues, your plan may be to show her how to safely scrub around the face, because she may not feel comfortable with getting soap close to eyes. Or it could be to teach her that we want the area clean even if we're using clippers because we want the skin underneath to be clean. And again, that one comes from personal experience. I worked with a brusher bather who just thought that, well, they're going to clean that. They're going to take that out anyway with a clipper, right? So when we think about the complaint, brusher bather doesn't get faces clean, then we made a plan based on the information we gathered about this individual. Okay? And what kind of dogs is she having trouble with? Is it the really, really hairy noses? Or is it Chihuahuas or something with a really small face like the pugs that have lots of folds? So when we see it as an education opportunity, we ask those questions, we gather our clues, and we make a plan that is very individual. So I have another example, trying to keep it closer to home for vets and for trainers and for owners. But here's one. Vets and groomers should get this one. The complaint, my clippers are really loud. Ooh, so now we're going to gather clues. Again, I ask tons of questions. I like asking questions. It gets to the meat of the matter, right? So gather clues. Is this a new problem? Does it make a lot more noise without the blade, or is it only with a blade? Is it a particular blade, or all of your blades? Are your blades oiled and in good shape? Has the clipper been dropped? If you press the blade on tighter, does the sound go away? Right? We would ask a lot of questions instead of, oh, my clippers are really loud. Well, send them in to service them. Right? So I want you to think we ask a lot more questions. In so many other areas of our life, we need to start doing it with dogs when they're having a problem. It comes so naturally to us when we think that way. Because now a plan for the my clippers are really loud could be if you press the blade on tighter and the sound goes away, it could need a new hinge. It could be a blade that needs adjustment. It could be a blade that needs oil. It could be a clipper that was dropped and needs to be serviced. But those are all kind of different solutions because the problem was very specific once we gathered our clues. So I want you to think, the point about all of this is that the more information we have on any particular problem will help us lead to the correct solution. Right? We want to find the particular solution for that situation, for that problem, for that individual. And if we approach everything like it's a mystery, like we're reading Agatha Christie or Sherlock Holmes, right? When we think about everything as some sort of a mystery and we're gathering clues, and some of those clues are based on past experiences, which is part of why, say, talking to a trainer or a behavior consultant can be really helpful, or talking to a groomer. If you're a trainer, talking to a groomer can be very helpful because we have a different level of experience. To give you another example, Sherlock Holmes, if you are not familiar with the time period, you're not going to catch the same kind of clues. So ask questions before going to suggestions so that you can get better results. This week's action step is to find some subject, some complaint, issue, or problem, and gather your clues. Ask so many questions. And when you think you're done asking questions, ask some more questions. And see how many questions you can ask and how much information you can get so that you can learn how to ask these questions to be able to make more effective plans. So have a great week and stay curious. If you'd like to talk to me, you can find me through my grooming and training business, happycrittersdogtraining.com, my email, chrissy@happycritters.net, and through the Creating Great Grooming Dogs Facebook page. And we have these awesome devices in our pockets that allow us to do live video with each other. I can help you with the dog on your table. We can set up live lessons, and you may be surprised at how much we can get accomplished together via video.